It's another week's edition of the International Sphere, whereas we are still focusing on wildlife conservation in the United States of America. Defenders of Wildlife is a non-profit conservation organization based in the United States of America. Its mission is to protect all animals and plants nature to North America in their natural communities. In Washington, D.C., where is the national headquarters of the Defenders of Wildlife, we are privileged to interview the Senior Vice President Conservation Program, Mr. Bob Dreher. Here he starts by explaining on the role of the wildlife defenders.
Well, we are relatively unique among the conservation groups in the United States because our sole focus is on wildlife and their habitat. And so we are the leading voice for wildlife, for the protection of wildlife and for the protection of its habitat in the United States. And our mission is just to ensure that we maintain a rich legacy of living wildlife in the United States and its habitat, and we work internationally as well.
As you're saying that you also work internationally, for a country like Tanzania, what is your input there?
Well, we do not do much work directly on the ground with species in Africa, although we recognize the importance of those species in world conservation, and we pay very close attention to the issues of wildlife trafficking. We have, with respect to species in Tanzania, we have been one of the strongest voices within our government and up on our Capitol Hill to push forward the recent ban on ivory sale in the United States that the Fish and Wildlife Service has issued and finalized this past summer. I just came from the Fish and Wildlife Service, which is our national wildlife agency in the United States, and what was part of helped finalize those regulations. Defenders was a very strong voice in pushing that forward. We also participate with other environmental groups, including groups whose primary focus is on Africa, in something called the National Wildlife Trafficking Alliance, which is a coalition of businesses and environmental groups based in the United States that is focused on changing social attitudes and reducing demand and trying to basically bring the American public to full awareness of the importance of not buying illegally sourced wildlife. Our hope is to the extent that the United States is part of the problem, and it certainly is, it's a big part of the problem, we're hoping to really pitch in and do our share.
What is the significance of crushing the ivory?
Well, the point about crushing the ivory is to demonstrate that its only value really is on a living elephant. It has what we think is an artificial value in world trade because people value it as a luxury commodity. That's what's driving the killing of the elephants, is the very high prices that people are willing to pay for ivory. We're trying to send the signal that we do not view ivory as something that should be traded. That's one of the reasons why the Fish and Wildlife Service has just put out a regulation making it illegal to buy and sell ivory in the United States, with a few minor exceptions. So it's really to be a very visible symbol. That's what this is a memento of my time at the Fish and Wildlife Service and my involvement in the ivory crushes in Denver and in New York City, to really demonstrate to the world that we are committed to saving the elephants and not the luxury products of ivory. So this is all ivory that had been seized as being illegally imported. It's all law enforcement contraband. It would never have been released for sale under any circumstances, but by destroying it, we really send a strong signal that our commitment is to saving living elephants.
What type of legal framework to wildlife protection is the U.S. dealing with?
Well, we have a deeply rooted system of wildlife protection in this country that comes out of our evolution as a country. We have a federal system in this country where we have states that are very strong sources of government within their states' boundaries, and then a federal government which has overarching control for things like interstate commerce. And so both parts, the federal government and the state governments, are strongly involved in wildlife conservation in this country. Most of the wildlife in the country, in terms of its management, in terms of hunting seasons, this sort of thing, is managed by state agencies. The federal government protects endangered species under our Endangered Species Act. And it also has a very strong system of national lands, national wildlife refuges, managed by the Fish and Wildlife Service, which is a national agency. And so there's a coordination between those two in this country. It works pretty well. We have strong commitments by the American public to protecting habitat and maintaining healthy wildlife populations. But it's, of course, there's always tensions when you have development pressures. We have pressures on our public lands and our western lands from oil and gas development and other kinds of development that put stress on wildlife habitat and could lead to endangerment for species. So those are things we're trying to navigate. And Defenders of Wildlife acts as a critical voice for the American public to express the importance of protecting wildlife and to ensure that both the states and the federal government do their jobs.
How do you address the issue of poaching?
Well, we really have two areas of involvement. I mean, our primary engagement is with the United States. Our commitment really is to maintaining the health of wildlife populations and habitat in North America and primarily in the United States. We do some work in Mexico and in Latin America as well. With respect to poaching in the United States, that's an issue that is really managed by the state wildlife agencies and by the Fish and Wildlife Service law enforcement agencies. And we support their work and ensure that they get adequate funding from Congress to do this work. Internationally, we have been among the leaders among the environmental community in focusing on wildlife traffic coming out of Latin America. The United States is a very major market for illegal wildlife products coming out of Latin America, and there are many, many species less known than the rhino and the elephant, but equally endangered and under great stress from illegal trapping and illegal trade. Some of them living animals being brought in for the pet trade, some of them dead animals and dead products, caiman skins, this sort of thing, parrots coming up from Latin America. And we have done a major report. Defenders of Wildlife has done a major report analyzing the flows of illegal wildlife trade from Latin America. So that's our primary focus on international work to try to reduce poaching. As I say, we do strongly support the alliance of groups and of companies that are working together to reduce demand for illegal products in the United States. And we work very hard up on Capitol Hill in our own legislature to support the Fish and Wildlife Service, its international programs.
As defenders of wildlife are very much active in the court, how do you see the prosecuting of offenders? Are there any challenges?
Well, there certainly are challenges. And in the United States, for example, one of the major commitments that we have made that under President Obama, who has issued an executive order calling for a government-wide effort to reduce illegal wildlife trafficking. And one of the efforts we have made have been to build recognition within the courts and within our legislature that wildlife crimes are as serious as any other form of international crime, any other form of crime that involves theft and large sums of money. These are resources that are being stolen from the people of the countries where where the wildlife are being taken. And they're not always recognized as serious crimes, even in the United States, although we have done much better. I actually came, before I went to the Fish and Wildlife Service, I led the Environment Division of the United States Department of Justice, which prosecutes wildlife criminals. And we have done much better in the last decade in ensuring significant jail sentences and significant penalties and seizing the assets of people that are trading illegally in wildlife products and treating them just as seriously as people that trade in narcotics, in weapons, in human trafficking. Wildlife crime is a crime that threatens international security. It threatens the livelihoods of the nations where it's coming and should be taken seriously. That's a big challenge in the range countries around the world. The United States has its own issues, and we're working hard to strengthen our laws. But there's been, I think, very, very helpful growth in awareness of the seriousness of wildlife crime in Africa, in Tanzania, in Kenya. Real, I think, steps forward in the way these crimes are being prosecuted and the sentences that they're being given. One of the things that's really important with wildlife crime is to ensure, if it's going to be treated seriously, you're going to face sophisticated defense counsel that will try to get the criminals off. You have to be sure you have a complete chain of evidence, that you can really demonstrate that the wildlife that was seized in the field is actually the same wildlife, that the elephant tusks that were taken or the rhino horns are the elephant tusks and rhino horns that were taken by the people that are being prosecuted. And so having a wildlife lab, Kenya has a wildlife lab. I think Tanzania is making steps in that direction. Having a sophisticated forensic capacity is really important to support the prosecutions.
Why crush the ivory and not sell?
Well, I mean, for us, the simple answer is that it is an illegal contraband, and it's more important to demonstrate that it is illegal and that we will take very strong steps to stop this trade than it is to try to recover any kind of money you could get from selling it. It sends a terrible mixed message if you try to sell it, because it sends the message that it really is valuable and that people should pay money for it. What we're trying to send is the opposite message, that it should not be used for luxury products. It should only be kept on elephants, living elephants. It is, in our mind, exactly the same as narcotics that we seize. Those narcotics have street values of hundreds of millions of dollars. We would never sell them because they're harmful. And the whole point of seizing them is to put a stop to that trade. Similarly here, the whole point of seizing the ivory is to stop the illegal trade in ivory. So it would really be, I think, really inappropriate to try to capitalize on the cash value of something which you want to say is illegal and should never have been traded.
You have managed to be in Tanzania or to visit Tanzania. Your observation there in terms of wildlife conservation and management, what exactly did you see? What did you perceive?
Well, so I had the the privilege of seeing some of the most beautiful areas on Earth. I spent some time in the Serengeti, and I spent time in Arusha, and was able to be part of an international wildlife trafficking conference that was held in Tanzania a couple of years ago. What I learned there, and I was there with experts from the Fish and Wildlife Service, which was where I was then working. The sense I had was that Tanzania had not only some of the priceless jewels of world conservation, but that it was terribly challenged. I mean, there were other areas in the south of Tanzania where the elephant populations in the Selous and other areas were being decimated by illegal poaching. And that level of intrusion had not yet hit Serengeti, and with luck it never will. But there are other areas of Tanzania that are equally important biologically and equally part of the heritage of the Tanzanian people that were under terrible stress. So it struck me as a country that had terrific challenges to meet, and was struggling to meet them, but was determined to try to meet them. So my hope is that they are making greater strides in bringing the poaching under control.
You kept eating humans?
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Watch out for those guys.
Oh yeah,
It
no.
could be a hazard, that's for sure.
Yeah, no.
I know what you mean.
I was on the shoulder of the road.
Bob Dreher shares with us something peculiar.
That's the grass. You need to look up.
Like this, visual.
Yeah. Then apart from the wildlife,
Some of the natural.
Well, so Defenders has been a strong proponent for wildlife conservation since the 1940s. One of the things I think that we are proudest of is the leading role that we played in the enactment of the Endangered Species Act, which is the strongest wildlife conservation law in the world, and provides the backbone of protection for imperiled species in this country, and implements our international commitments under the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. We have been playing a leading role in defending our Endangered Species Act against a wide range of attacks by conservatives in our political process, by corporations, by development interests, because they view protecting endangered species as a roadblock to economic development. And our perspective is very different. Our perspective is that for the American future, you need to have a balance. You need to have the natural heritage of our country and of our people protected in order to ensure the quality of our way of life. And we think that can be done. One of the things one of the places where we've really demonstrated that has been our leadership in bringing back wolves into the American landscape. Wolves were almost entirely eradicated by the actions of American settlers who viewed them as a threat and shot them on sight. But they play a critical role in the ecosystem of our forests and of our wildlands in the West. And Defenders of Wildlife was really instrumental in helping to restore them, to reintroduce them into the Rocky Mountains, where they are now thriving and playing the role they should play.
Okay. As we're winding up, anything that you'd like to share with us pertaining to our topic, wildlife conservation and management?
Well, I think the thing that strikes me from my chance to visit your country and from the work that I've done both in government and here now at Defenders is how much we have in common. The challenges we face are particular to our own countries and to the wildlife species that are so critical to our way of life. But we have so much in common. We are trying to protect wildlife together because we know it's important for our future and for our children. The ways that we are helping each other internationally is absolutely crucial. And I just think that we have so much in common that if people from your country could visit our country, as you have had a chance to do, and see the wildlife that we have to protect, if our people could visit Tanzania, as many American tourists get the chance to do, and see the richness and beauty of your country, it would just show how much we are global citizens and sharing the same endeavor.
On that note, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Your time.
Thank you.
Much has been achieved by Defenders of Wildlife, which is a non-profit organization established in 1947 in the United States of America in protecting all animals and plants' nature.